Welcome back to the channel. Today we got a Piers Morgan reaction, and we know how nuanced Piers Morgan videos are, right? Let's see if we get down to business because I'm very interested to hear how. And to be fair, some MAGA have been like kind of shocked from it, but I'm curious to see how MAGA tries to downplay the Epstein files now. So we'll see. Left, right debate. I'll agree, disagree, depending on what they say, and I'll try to add a nuanced opinion when it's warranted. All right, let's dive into it.
Well, based on my own experience at the CIA, there's very little daylight between the CIA and the FBI. You know, the CIA said there was no torture program. That was a lie. No international renditions. That was a lie. No secret prisons. That was a lie. MK Ultra documents were all released. That was a lie. The CIA didn't try to recruit Oswald. That's a lie. These organizations that make up the so-called deep state, and we can have that debate whether or not you want to call it the deep state, but they all lie. They're trained to lie. And so
I'm not interested in like fact checking everything he says. This is my rule of thumb when it comes to like people who have like large conspiracy theories. I think for the most part, if they say like absolute claims with no hedging in it, more than likely they are conspiracy brain. And always take those people with a grain of salt. If they can provide a articulate logic and understanding nuance, because this stuff tends to be very gray and very much deeper than how it seems on the surface, because I know some people believe like there's an overarching evil narrative. Sometimes there may be evil intent, but with a maybe understandable purpose. Like this stuff is never as simple as black and white. That's all I want to say.
I don't even think that we should blame the likes of Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. I think people probably at a lower level destroyed whatever they could destroy and let the lie go up to the very top and hope that this whole thing just goes away. If there are no
So that's the strategy. That's the new strategy. You know, Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, what could they do? To be honest, it probably was just destroyed before they even got there. So honestly, it's not their fault. Is that so? This is how we're going to protect them. Really? Let's continue.
Documents to implicate famous people, then it'll eventually go quiet. And my guess is in 30 years or 50 years or whenever it's going to be, at least some of the truth will probably be released.
Adam Mockler, I mean, it does stick in the gullet, doesn't it, that the only person to go to prison and the whole Epstein scandal is a woman.
Yeah, well, John said he thinks the people at the bottom might have destroyed the evidence, but the reality is the people at the top, like Pam Bondi, were the ones saying they had the list sitting on their desk. So it seems like that deep state you referred to, the party that promised to defeat the deep state, very quickly became the deep state. Here's the timeline in my eyes. Pam Bondi says,
oh, he's about to cook crazy because he's absolutely correct. They said they found thousands of footage. She said the list and all the documents was on her desk. All of these things were said clear as day to the public. So, all right, let's see how you're gonna twist this one.
I have the list on my desk right here. They're rather silent for a few months. Then Elon Musk says Trump is in the Epstein list. Then within weeks, apparently the list is gone. I mean, I'm looking at this photo of Jack Posobiec holding up the Epstein files. It says the Epstein files, phase 1. But where's phase 2? There's no phase 2. So I'm happy that influencers like Jack are admitting they were conned by the admin to cover up the sexual abuse of children.
Yeah, Jack, I mean, do you feel angry?
We're firing all cylinders. Oh. I mean, at the end of the day, this is no joking matter. Like, we all recognize that, yeah, you know, being right about MAGA and being right about Donald Trump again, you know, it kind of feels good, but not really, because we're talking about serious stuff right here. We're talking about a serious matter right here. We're talking about the abuse of children right here. This is all this is social media, so sometimes you got to play it up a little bit, but this is a very important conversation because it's been said for a very long time on how elites have abused, taken advantage of the inferior in very exploitive and sexual ways. Even if we don't truly believe, if you're one of those people that truly believe that the list never existed, we'll get to that, I'm sure, in this video. One thing you do realize is that would it make sense that there is a group of people who do that? It has been said multiple times when Hollywood does it. I mean, we had the whole stuff with the Diddy case, and now apparently there are people praising Diddy. Now that's weird. That's crazy. And Donald Trump is now talking about potentially pardoning Diddy. Insane. We have the situation where a person who knows K-pop stars talks about how the South Korean government and South Korean rich business people pay K-pop stars to have sex with, like a prostitution service. We can name examples throughout human history where elites take advantage of the young, of the inferior, and use them as objects. So when this came out, this honestly wasn't a surprise to society. It was an opportunity for society for finally exposing these weirdos in the elite class. Now, I don't like to fully, absolutely 100% of the time criminalize all rich, famous people. But we do know that they have privilege and they have accessibility the average person does not have. And if we can find out those people who exploit that, then we need to do that. We need to do that. And there's too many examples of that man that is the most powerful man in the world using those exploitation situations time and time again. All right, let's continue the conversation. I've been yapping too much.
Do you feel you were used in some way?
Well, it's something. It's very upsetting. It's extremely upsetting to be brought in something like this, to think that you're going into a situation where, hey, we're finally going to get some of these answers that we all want. Because at the end of the day, this is all about getting justice for the victims here, the actual victims. And I keep going back and looking over the different pieces of this story. You know, what was Prince Andrew disgraced for? Why did he go up on this huge interview and then lose all of his titles and all that, and he's losing his security now, I hear. And why did we go all the way around, name after name after name? But at the end of the day, it's actually about the victims. And do you really mean to tell me that all of those victims were questioned and all of the things that they said were investigated and were run down? Because it just doesn't really feel like that's been done here.
No, it doesn't. Talking of Elon Musk, Brian, just to bring you in again here. So Musk is now simultaneous to all this. Obviously, this flame out with Trump is gathering momentum. He's now announced the launch of a new political party, the America Party. Third parties have had, a few instances in modern American history. They never tend to get very far, but we've never had the richest and most successful businessman in history launch.
I wonder if they're going to get into this in this conversation. Yes. And I hope they're not immediately just pivoting to Elon Musk. Because one thing that Piers Morgan does all the time is anytime the heat starts turning up on Donald Trump, he pivots the conversation. If you've been watching my content, you know that I don't like Piers Morgan. He's biased towards Donald Trump 100%. There's no question about it. He calls him his friend for a reason, right? Just like how Donald Trump calls Epstein, or like Epstein calling Donald Trump his best friend for 10 years. Piers Morgan and Donald Trump are friends. So there's no way you can see what he's been doing leading up to the election and everything that has happened, and you go like, Piers is not biased to Trump. He's 100% biased to Trump. Hopefully this conversation gets back on topic, because there needs to be serious conversation on how Kash Patel, Dan Bonino were people who believe that the Epstein list is going to be this crazy thing, that they're going to expose everybody, people like J.D. Vance too, and a bunch of other Republicans in the government. And more so than anything else, bring up how Donald Trump, best friends with Epstein, Donald Trump, who has taken multiple images with very young-looking women, Donald Trump, who is now wants to move on from the Epstein list, saying things like, "Oh, why we're still talking about Epstein after all these years? Why are we not questioning him more?" There's something that let's see how this
Who's got
conversation goes.
$300 billion and happens to own one of the biggest social media platforms on which he has 200 million followers. He's not just your average third party guy, is he? How interesting is this? And how damaging could this be, particularly to Donald Trump and the Republicans?
I think it certainly hurts Republicans and Donald Trump more than Democrats. But I would also say what you mentioned, this is the richest man in the world. With money comes a lot of power. This has been tried in the past many a times, but it hasn't been tried with someone with the money and the power that Elon Musk has. But I think
Did we just completely move on from the Epstein conversation and talk about the American Party? Please tell me that we didn't just completely move on from the conversation that quickly.
the question we need to ask ourselves now is this just another phase that Elon Musk is on, or is he really now X? And he ended up doing that. He'll be talking about this, and this will be very damning, in my opinion, to plenty of MAGA Republicans out there.
Yeah, and Adam,
He's 100% correct about the American Party being very damaging to the MAGA. That's 100% objectively true.
What this all seems to center around is that he was brought in, obviously, to run Doge,
He completely moved on from Epstein after like 2 minutes. Yo, Piers. Oh, apparently they talk about it more here. All right, we're going back in time. All right.
with you. What's happened here? I mean, we were all led down a train of thought in case the files, the names, the lists, accountability, and then...
I mean, this is, as we would say in the military, completely unsat from Attorney General Pam Bondi. And this line about there being files that are currently under seal in some criminal case, well, then great. Let's go and get those unsealed as soon as possible. Look, I was brought to the White House under the pretense of a series of policy briefings that were going to be held, not just from the AG, but from, we had the vice president came in, the president came in, Bobby Kennedy came in. So we had a rotating series of people from the administration, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. And then nobody told us prior to this that the Epstein files would be anywhere even on the agenda for that day. And it was really sprung as a surprise to all of us. We get handed these binders, and then before we even have a chance to look into them, we're hauled out actually in front of the cameras that were all there because Prime Minister Keir Starmer was visiting the White House that day. And it just so happened that they were all in front of the West Wing. And by the time that we have the ability to actually go through them, well, lo and behold, we find out that it's all information that was completely already in the public domain. In fact, some of the information that was in the public domain was more extensive than what was given to us on that day. So the whole thing, obviously, I think, as you say, is a cock up. I hope I'm using that phrase correctly. I'm not.
So did he say that beforehand? Because he made it seem like it was a big deal when he got those binders. But based off how he's characterizing everything, it's very clear that it was a publicity stunt to make it seem like this is going to be a huge revelation to expose specifically the Democratic Party, because that's what MAGA wanted it to be. They wanted it to be the Democrat elites, right? They wanted it to be anybody but Republicans. So,
Really familiar with it, but that certainly feels like what happened here. And we don't have the accountability that was spoken of. We don't have the releases that were spoken of. And it's indefensible. It's indefensible that the answers aren't there when so much was promised.
Brian Shapiro, I mean, look, it's perfectly possible. Indeed, it looks increasingly likely that Epstein did indeed just commit suicide. What is not?
is it possible? Is it likely, Piers? You know, you gotta always look at intentionality and energy. We know he's biased towards Trump. I already articulated that in this video. I also had a video drop. If we go through the timeline of events of Epstein, we know that Epstein tried to take his life before. He had to go see a specialist. They let him out only a few days later, and he was supposed to be under security custody. And he also had a cellmate. They removed the cellmate. Security custody wasn't there. The people who were supposed to be watching him on camera were busy doing something else. And he was alone by himself with nobody watching him. But it's likely, at the very least, be cautious of it, right? Because this is the same person who would not give that same type of, credence if it was the Democrats. Because Piers is a fucking hypocrite. So my issue is the false central, centrist, nuance objectivity. That is my issue with Piers Morgan.
Perfectly possible to my cynical eye about this is that he was the only person other than Ghislaine Maxwell, who's been imprisoned, who was ever up to criminal.
At least he admits that right. Only Epstein and Maxwell was involved in this entire thing. At least he admits that, because that's almost impossible to defend.
Activity on his island and other places. It just stretches credulity. But nobody, it seems, is ever going to be held accountable other than him, who evaded accountability by killing himself, or Ghislaine Maxwell, a woman. So none of these other men who were linked to this are ever going to be even remotely held accountable. It's just disappeared.
Well, what I would say, Piers, first of all, when Haba did your show, where did she get that information from? Where did that come from back in February? I would also say to Pam Bondi, she lied on Fox News, or maybe she was telling the truth. She said she had a list that was on her desk, Piers. Where did that list go? Was she lying? Was that made up? And I'd also say, thirdly, and I know this is something that Jack probably doesn't want to bring up, but the fact of the matter is that Jeffrey Epstein's on audio saying at one point Donald Trump was his best friend. We also know that Donald Trump was on the Epstein flight log 7 times. We learned that in the Maxwell case. So I don't think it's a stretch to say maybe Donald Trump might be somewhere in these files. Maybe. We don't know that for sure. But I know if it was the other way around, and if it was Joe Biden that was best friends with Jeffrey Epstein at one point, that's all Jack and MAGA Republicans would be talking about. I think Donald Trump is on this list, and I think Donald Trump is in these files, and I think the Trump administration is hiding something.
I mean, what is extraordinary, I think, Brian, is that...
Let's see if Piers addresses what he says. Let's see if Piers has a level of objectivity when it comes to Donald Trump. Let's see it unfold. 3, 2, 1, go.
It all seems to have gone incredibly quiet from the moment Elon Musk started dragging Trump's name into the Epstein case when they fell out in posts on his X platform. And he's carried on overnight doing more posts, not directly linking the president, but saying what the hell has happened here effectively. But he was the one that ignited the Trump link again. You do wonder, is that involved here? Is Trump basically thought this is just going to be a lot of bad publicity here? Let's just get rid of him.
Yeah, well, I'll say this, Piers, anytime.
Is that all you had to say? Bad publicity? Bad publicity? How about it's bad that he could be on the list? This guy was absolutely correct. Piers Morgan will be so much more angry. He would have a more visceral tone. He would be much more accusatory if everything that was said about Trump and that was shown about Trump was said about Biden. The energy is so different. The energy is so different.
Somebody says something about Donald Trump that might not be true, Trump always threatens a lawsuit. Why is it that Donald Trump didn't threaten to sue Elon Musk when Elon Musk said that Trump was all over the Epstein files? I find that to be very, very interesting.
Because he did, I think he was about to say this, Donald Trump did sue, or was it either CNN or one of the media companies for saying that he R-worded someone, but instead he didn't R-word, he just SA'd someone, so they're technically not the same, and he sued over that. So Very interesting.
Bill Maher could call Donald Trump the son of an orangutan, and then Trump will file a lawsuit about that. Why wouldn't he file a lawsuit against Elon? Maybe Elon is telling the truth, and maybe Elon knows some things that the general public does not know. I tend to believe Elon on this one.
It's certainly intriguing. John Kiriakou, what do you think has happened here? I mean,
that's all you have to say? Okay. All right. Let's go back to this part.
The potential for a third party by somebody
to flip a couple of seats, run a couple of spoiler candidates, and if you
Florida
bring it
District
up,
Attorney who was
like your little,
have you
like,
heard of Alexander
1996
Acosta? You know who that is?
You're like actually helped Epstein be prosecuted. He went from one thing to the other, but if he sees perhaps a path forward from a business perspective, look, keep in mind he's still got to deal with the government in terms of a lot of the contracts for his companies, in terms of the Department of Defense, in terms of NASA, in terms of Tesla. So he's going to need a lot of this going forward. And I think whether they like it or not, they're stuck together.
He was friends with Epstein. He'll be friends with Elon.
What was that?
He was friends with Epstein. I'm sure he can be friends with Elon Musk.
He actually helped Epstein be prosecuted. He was the only person who was involved, kicked him out of the Epstein. You know all this. Like, it's just a very.
Have you heard of Alexander Acosta, the Florida District Attorney who was
like your little,
have you heard of Alexander Acosta? You know who that is?
You're like, oh, I got it. Look at me. Like, I'm the guy from Third Eye.
All right. Over under, people. Over under. Will Piers Morgan allow, what's his name, Adam? Will he allow Adam to say the facts about how Alexander Acosta handled the trial regarding Epstein and how Pam Bondi handled the trial regarding Epstein? Will Piers Morgan allow those facts to come out on his show? Take your bets now. All right, let's see. Come on.
You know who Alexander Acosta is? You were duped to cover up sexual abuse of
Donald
children.
Trump was
You were
kicked him
duped.
out of Mar-a-Lago. Donald Trump was the only one who went to investigators and said, "I will
Piers,
work
do you know
with
who
you
Alexander
against
Acosta is?
Epstein." This has been litigated a
Can I just add
million
something here?
times.
Well,
It's been litigated a million
first of
times.
all,
Can I just?
well,
can I
Brian, I'll
just-
come to you, but Adam, just explain what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah,
let's
really
go.
quickly, Alexander Acosta was a Florida district attorney. You can look this up. He knew both Trump and Epstein. He was appointed as a Secretary of Labor under Trump and had to resign in 2017 because people found out that he mishandled the Epstein case in 2007 and let Epstein get an illegal plea deal. Epstein was then able to go reoffend, and Trump appointed him in 2017. So I don't want to hear the dude that was brought to the White House to cover up sexual abuse saying that there was, I don't like, what are you trying to say here? Yeah.
You gonna wipe your face? Can you just wipe
Yeah.
that little thing off your face there a little bit? You got a little,
All right,
you got
hold on a
little
sec.
mud on your face.
Okay.
You have no points.
Hold on a second.
No
Can I
points,
just-
huh?
You could not respond to that because that's just objectively true. Let's hear what this guy is saying. I wonder if he's gonna bring up the stuff regarding Pam Bondi because I think Pam Bondi is also very much associated with the plea deal as well. I believe from what I've seen on passing, and I believe Alexander Acosta, as of right now, has a position of authority. Might as well. Well, let me see if he says it, and if he doesn't say it, I'll show you guys the position Alexander Acosta has right now.
Can I add
You got-
something?
you got a little
First
mud
of
on your
all,
face
I
there.
hear the MAGA bullshit detector going off every single time Jack opens his mouth. First of all, people like Jack were the people who called Joe Biden a pedophile for sniffing hair, but yet we have Jeffrey Epstein on tape calling Donald Trump his best friend. They were hanging out together constantly. I've spoken to Jeffrey Epstein's brother
Do you want me
many
to go
times.
through the list
They were
of all
very
the
close.
Democrats that
I'm
he was
not done
friends
yet,
with?
Jack.
Piers, like
Jack,
we can
Jack,
go
that's
through all
Jack,
this again, but Piers,
Jack,
I know you've done
Jack,
this
I'm not done yet. I didn't interrupt you.
You've been
Jack,
a real reporter
Jack,
on this. These guys just want to play
Jack,
politics. I'm trying to be
Jack,
serious here.
Jack,
Dude, you were at the White
Jack,
House
I'm
with
a talk
Epstein
show
files
host.
in your hand.
Yeah, just talked about it.
Right, exactly, Jack. Jack, just you want to defend Donald Trump and we're the Donald Trump knee pads 24/7, but when it comes to a Democrat, they're all pedophiles. But if Donald Trump is actually hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein and
So do you
Epstein
have like
calls
any
him
evidence
his
of
best
this? Like,
friend,
can you have like a source on that, bro?
Oh, all the circumstantial proof and the evidence that exists, we can't see it because we're never going to see the client list. We're never going to see it. So how am I going to get the evidence if they're hiding the list? All right, let me show you Alexander Acosta. Let me show you what position he is real quick because I do think that is important as well. And I'll also show you real quick how Pam Bondi was involved too. So I was able to confirm real quick. I was incorrect. I was thinking of his first term. So yeah, he was the United States Secretary of Labor from 2017 to 2019. It's always good to fact check. So he doesn't have a position now, but I thought he had a position now, but I was thinking about the position he had prior. So we got that out of the way. And Pam Bondi. So in 2011 to 2019, Pam Bondi was Florida's Attorney General. Democrats accused Pam Bondi of letting Jeffrey Epstein slide. There was a quote, they said, the same Pam Bondi who let Epstein slide. Democrat strategist Amnesia Cross posted as Donald Trump named her as the Attorney General, heaping praises on her and spelling out her credentials. If you ever wonder how Jeffrey Epstein was able to walk the earth unprosecuted and have all of his contacts sealed, look no further than Pam Bondi. So, because she was the Attorney General of Florida, people are also associating with her what happened with the Epstein stuff. So it's a combination of Acosta and Pam Bondi is the allegation, right? That's how they're all related.
Oh,
No, because the Pam Bondi won't release the sources.
Actually, yeah.
All right, we'll watch a few more minutes and then we'll wrap it up. I don't want this video to be too long.
I do. The Maxwell
So-
trial,
so-
where it
so
was
let's hear it.
learned that
Please
he
show
was
us.
on the Epstein flight. Why don't you listen? It was in the trial, in the Maxwell trial, that he was on the flight log 7 times. We have Jeffrey Epstein
And
on
Bill Clinton was on
audio
there 26
calling
times.
him his best friend. So here's my question to Jack. Jack,
And how
if
many times did Bill
Jeffrey
Clinton go
Epstein
to the
was on
islands?
audio,
And how many times did
Hey,
Jeffrey Epstein say
first
that
of all,
he was one of the
that's
founding
called
members of the
whataboutism.
Clinton Institute?
I don't defend
Clinton Global Initiative.
Jack. If Jeffrey Epstein
this
was
all day
on
long, bro.
audio,
No, you can't, because you refuse to acknowledge the possibility of Donald Trump being on there, but you bring up allegations of Bill Clinton being on there. You can't do it all alone because you don't want to give ground to your Lord and Savior, but you want to point at every other direction. Prince Andrews, you pointed at him. Bill Clinton, is it Prince Andrews? I don't know idea. Bill Clinton, you pointed at him. So you can't do this all day because you refuse to point the finger this way.
saying that Joe Biden was his best friend, that wouldn't concern you at all?
Man, these are
All
like
you do is
2016
deflect and you
talking
talk
points.
about other
Like, don't you
people.
guys have anything new?
I mean,
Pathetic. You're a bitch. You pathetic. Oh man, I don't know how much circumstantial evidence you need to the point where you look at the very least you got to look at Donald Trump sideways. Go I mean, it's kind of weird. There's no doubt it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird that this guy who's the best friend, who has all these relationships with Donald Trump, who Alexander Acosta and Pam Bondi, who were associated with letting Epstein go free. It's kind of weird that he died under Donald Trump's administration, suicide, even though that whole situation was weird. And it's kind of weird that you built up this whole thing about releasing the Epstein files, and then the moment you're president again, now there's no client list. There's a lot of conspiracies that exist. There's very few conspiracies that have that many connective layers. I'm gonna be honest.
My line about the
Release the
Epstein,
files.
but my line about the Epstein
Anything
circle of famous friends is, to me, that there's a clear line before his initial conviction, which was a complete stitch up in his favor, no question of that.
Jack, why won't they release the files then?
Well, hang on, Brian.
Called for them to.
Hang on, Brian. The point I'm going to make is, I do think if you continue to be a friend of Epstein, knowing he was a convicted pedophile after whatever it was, 2009 or so, as Prince Andrew did, for example, then I'm afraid that is seriously problematic. For those who were in his circle, of a wide circle of well-known people, from Bill Gates to Trump to all these, Bill Clinton, I mean, he hooked in everybody, but a lot of them had nothing to do with him, including Trump, I believe, after that conviction. Well-known people, as Prince Andrew did, for example, then I'm afraid Epstein, knowing he was a convicted, if you continue to be a friend of Epstein, knowing he was a convicted pedophile after whatever it was, 2009 or so, as Prince Andrew did, for example, then I'm afraid that is seriously problematic. For those who were in his circle, of a wide circle of well-known people, from Bill Gates to Trump to all these, Bill Clinton, I mean, he hooked in everybody, but a lot of them had nothing to do with him, including Trump, I believe, after that conviction. But if you carried on seeing him as Andrew did, living at his house for a few.
And there's the Piers Morgan defense. Well, Donald Trump, after the conviction, I mean, he wasn't his friend, right? You know, he disowned him. So obviously he's not involved. Obviously.
Days, years later, knowing he was a convicted pedophile, that is different. I mean, do we agree?
Yeah. I think that's all been litigated.
I certainly agree with what you're saying, Piers, and your point there. But the point that I'm trying to make is there has to be a reason why they're not releasing the files. Why are they being so mum? Why is the list just magically disappeared? And I think one can come to a very logical conclusion, unless you're Jack and you defend Donald Trump 24/7, that maybe there might be something to do with the fact that Trump might be in these files, and there might be some wrongdoing there, considering the fact that they were at one point best friends.
Well, they certainly.
All right, here's more Piers Morgan defense. Here we go. After Piers Morgan defends him like the little bitch he is, I don't, I try to be empathetic to like MAGA followers, but in terms of people who have no integrity and try to make themselves seem like they're nuanced and objective, yeah, that shit is dangerous, bro. That shit is dangerous. He is a MAGA platform. He's not nuanced. Just be honest. Be honest. All right. I'll take back me calling you a bitch if you here give me a good nuanced opinion.
Gone as an administration from full bore, we're going to reveal everything, and it's really shocking, and there's going to have to be accountability. I mean, I had them on my show. They've gone from that position to suddenly, no, there's nothing mysterious about his death. He definitely killed himself. Here's the CCTV footage, and there is no client list, and none of that is right. And actually, you know what? It's all over. And it is odd. I mean, John
Piers,
again, John, from with your intelligence hat on, does this? I mean, do you smell a rat here? Does this look like there's been a little bit of a closing of ranks to shut this up?
Yes, I do smell a rat. And I'd like to know why no one in the media is talking about the investigation, or the fact that there should have been an investigation into whether or not Jeffrey Epstein was working for a foreign intelligence service. Let's say that.
So that's really interesting. So look, you've studied into this. What is?
Okay. Well, I apologize for calling you a bitch, Piers. I think you gave a decent opinion. I think it wasn't a defense of Trump. I'll give you that. I do think your refusal to link Trump and Epstein is very obvious. You refuse to do it. You won't do it. That's very obvious. But this video is already 35 minutes long, and I don't want to make these videos too long. So that is all we got for this reaction. You guys can watch the full thing on Piers Morgan's channel, of course, to hear everything. Ultimately, my opinion is very clear. I think we should release the full documents. I think all the lists, the list should have been revealed. I don't care who's on it. I don't care what celebrity's on it. If you're a scumbag that is doing those things to young girls, I don't give a fuck. Lock him up. Don't matter who. Even if it's my favorite NBA player, Kobe Bryant. Even if it's my favorite NFL player, Eli Manning. I don't care. I just don't care. Even if it's Oda, I don't care. Lock him up. I'm not going to be sympathetic to anybody who does those terrible things to children. Okay. Now, there's always the possibility that no list never existed, but my only thing here is I refuse to allow MAGA to say that, considering how they built this up and used it as a means to tear down the Democratic Party leading up to the election. If you're going to say that there is a list, you guarantee there's a list, and you've been speaking in absolute terms for so long, and I know you guys would not give the same leeway if a Democrat was president, then the only choice you have is to reveal everything you have. No doctored, no redactions. Everything needs to be released. And based on how Donald Trump has been talking, it's very clear he does not want to release anything. He doesn't. So with that said, hope you guys enjoyed this reaction. You all have a good one. Take care and peace.